Am I told to take moments, however brief, especially at the beginning or the end of the day, to sit quietly like this and turn inwards. During the day, I spend so much time with the outside world, in the company of other people, in the company of sound and action and time. And these quiet moments are when I get to spend time in the company of myself. Communication with myself is in a very unique language. It's the language of silence. My attention stepping outside of the busyness of sound, time, and action, coming inside into that simple, quiet realm beyond time, beyond action, and beyond sound. The language of silence is built from the experience of what is eternal. A language of ancient memories, eternal memories. Does not require physicality or activity or time or sound. Just requires remembering that eternally I am a soul. I am, I have been, I always will be a soul, a spiritual being traveling through time. It is in silence, through that language of silence, that this thought, this idea becomes real, an experience. Silence awakens me. Om Shanti.
Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. Tonight's topic is silence and soul consciousness. I think that this word silence already is quite a loaded word when it comes to spirituality, or not even in spirituality, just in day-to-day life. Often it's not used in good light. So perhaps maybe just an introduction through the lens of Raj Yoga. What is silence?
From a spiritual perspective, Raj Yoga, silence obviously is not emptiness or the absence of sound necessarily, but it's a very full state in which what is eternal, the sound of what is eternal, the experience of what is eternal, is very emerged. So, using that container of silence to experience my own eternal identity, the eternal identity of others, the eternal nature of time, and the significance of what's happening around me in the perspective of that bigger picture. So sometimes I compare it to water, that when I go dive, if I'm in the pool and I dive underwater, everything above the surface is kind of gone. It's kind of blocked out by the water itself. And of course, it's very full, but I have a very different experience. There's no gravity going on, and there's floating, and I have a variant. The interesting thing is, when I'm above water, I have to, as you can see, have correctional lenses to see properly. But when I'm underwater, I actually don't need these. The water itself is providing clarity. So silence, I feel, is sort of the same. The worldly fades into the distance. I'm in this very full, immersive experience, and things that may have been invisible suddenly come into focus, which is what the non-physical is all about. I also feel that silence is a kind of power that can fuel activity rather than be separated from activity.
I believe you mentioned it in the commentary, but I've heard you share in the past, perhaps maybe in more settings for regular students, that it's only in silence when I can experience soul consciousness. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the question then what comes first, silence or soul consciousness, or is it a cyclical thing? Do they feed off each other? Just thinking about a student who just starts Raja Yoga course, what do they do with that?
I think that definitely together, but I have to be, again, if we think of silence as stepping outside the sound or the gravity of what is physical, I will have to be open and comfortable with moving my attention from the worldly to something else. And that's maybe where silence begins, is just being open to going outside of what the physical senses can perceive. And it's often this idea of going inwards, starting to feel the experience of the self as a soul, because the true nature of the soul is peaceful or silent. I start to have a deeper experience of silence, which allows me to connect to the self more and just gets into kind of an upward spiral.
So, as you're saying, they feed off of each other. So, and you're mentioning about just being open to having my attention somewhere that's not physical. If I were just somebody who has just come into the course, what are some things that you would share in terms of actually creating that experience of silence? Of course, we're not talking about just one session, but just what does that look like in terms of creating a bridge, in terms of, let's say, a series of sessions? What is it that a soul needs to pay attention to in terms of thoughts, feelings, awareness, all of those things?
Usually, what can be very helpful, because I think souls are actually accessing that kind of silence. It's connected to solitude and concentration. So usually what we do is start with what we're familiar with, which is very absorbed through our physical senses with the outer world. And then we start to take that physical sensitivity to a more and more subtle level. So we might say, which we could try right now, to, see if you can detect the heartbeat of the body. So we might gently, we don't want anyone to pass out, ask souls to touch you here, and automatically you can feel they're starting to concentrate, try and touch something subtle, listen. So this is preparing us to go and to step across that line between physical and non-physical. So more and more subtle observation of what we're used to. And finally, we start to suggest, okay, going even more subtle, start to watch your own thoughts. So now we've crossed that line between physical and non-physical, and then following those thoughts to their origin. Understanding I am the one who is thinking. Focus on the self, the thinker. So it's going, I think, through a series of lives from what is very familiar to what is eternal.
How does one know they're going into that experience in a healthy way? Especially sometimes I've heard students say they get headaches, or they, with what they think that is an experience that others, and maybe it's not accurate, but feedback from others is that they're withdrawing to a point where they're not engaged, or they're disengaged, or they start to avoid, or oneself starts to feel they're disengaged, or they're falling asleep. What seems to have fallen apart in terms of trying to go on that journey?
If it was a physical example and someone's doing something and they start to experience pain, we tell them to stop. Either one of two things is going on, things, directions, but if they did, there might be some, so they have to be given a different progression. Same destination, but dial it down. So those are things that happen spiritually as well. The one thing I've liked about open-eyed meditation, because I think, again, silence has been connected to the cessation of the physical inputs. So say silence and people immediately close the eyes or go into a stimuli reduced container, let's have low lights and no sound and no people. And so the beauty of open-eyed is I'm still looking, but I am so acutely present, as if everything's snapped into focus. Everything's real. So I'm not separating myself from the physical. I'm just changing my perspective relative to the physical. And the other thing is I feel very real and very peaceful. So I'm looking for these signs, these signposts. Silence is a power. So it's meant to be very active, not passive. It's not meant to be avoiding or checking out. It's actually with this silence, with the presence of the self, I now have a very different relationship with the physical realm. That is, that peace becomes more sustainable, that inner peace. So whatever is going on, if there's that inner silence, that connection to the eternal, I am less and less affected, especially negatively, by what's happening around me.
In terms of this aspect of quality of thoughts, how does that play a role in terms of silence? I mean, sometimes we use the word purity in the study, but is pure thoughts, pure feelings, emerging because of silence? Is a sign that I'm actually going into the healthy space, or is that I need these things? Is it kind of both on both sides of the experience?
I had someone say something to me yesterday, which I'd never thought of, but it did stay with me. I found an interesting connection they had in their mind, and they were saying meditators are usually intelligent people, and I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I agree with that or not. But I do think meditators have very unique intellects, which is different than intelligent. So often they can have very little education going on there, but they have sensibility. So what I'm to be doing, we could say pure thoughts, but that can even be a challenge. But at least I'm very attracted to thoughts that are based on the truth. The intellect, which likes attainment, it likes to chew on the truth of meditators, the truth about myself, who am I really, the truth about others, who others really, what is their innate value, and the truth about what is really going on. To go into a lot of analysis, that's not intellect, that's different. But this kind of way, again, this clarity of seeing that silence allows. So there's a certain quality of thought, there's a lot of interest in exploring the truth for someone who's going to easily be able to move into silence.
I just wanted to refer to something you shared earlier about maybe a progression is needed, just like in physical fitness. Do you have any thoughts about what kind of progressions are needed in terms of going to silence? Especially, I do appreciate when you use those physical examples. If someone cannot do a certain posture of some sort of alignment in physical fitness, there needs to be some progressions. What would that look like in Raja Yoga?
We recently had a really lovely, well, it wasn't that recent, it was a few months ago now, a very lovely program which had a build up. So, Inner Freedom Through Spirituality was the name of the program. And souls were taken on a journey, which really was moving into that silence, a very beautiful quality of thought. And one of the simplest progressions actually was looking at inputs during the day. The device, how am I using that? The news, the media, all of these things. That's a really simple place to start, actually. It's not that these are noisy in and of itself, but I'm remembering again, silence is going to be based on quality of what I'm thinking about. And if that food I'm putting into the mind is very worldly, very physical, very temporal, which is the opposite of the things that silence is about, it's kind of counterproductive. So being a little bit more careful about the inputs, the device, gossip, starting to be more aware of these things that I'm putting into my mind that actually are not making silence any more accessible.
I hope I can squeeze these two questions in time. One is this aspect of, again, I know as we shared earlier, you hear the word silence and it can kind of scare souls, but you have shared that you love the experience of silence. You have spent a lot of time with a lot of senior students. What has that feeling been? And because it's leading to my second question, that feeling of what that experience feels like, because you also mentioned it's a power. What does that feel like for I guess just those around in their presence, whether they are in the study of Raja Yoga or not. If you actually have any, experiences to share of what that's been like.
Silence to me feels like chocolate for the soul. It creates a deep, deep sense of contentment or bliss because silence literally is a conduit for everything the soul has been starved for, which is that deep peace, that deep love, that deep healing. Literally, because it has the vibrations of what is eternal, and I, the soul, am eternal. It's like someone who's so thirsty because the body is made up of so much water, so dehydrated, so thirsty, and just to get a drop of water is so satisfying because it's what the body is made of. Similarly, in a way, I, the soul, am made of silence. That is all the things that silence has saturated with the eternal qualities of the soul. And so being able to consume those or absorb those through the silence, it creates a deep contentment. The moment the soul experiences contentment, that is freedom from desire, this fullness, it's bliss. You're happy with everything, happy with everyone, you're content. And that doesn't mean that I am inactive. But I'm far more powerful, less affected by those desires that have been really pulls us all over the place and create such havoc in our lives. So moving through the world in a contented state actually gets us closer to destinations such as success, fulfillment, etc., than we would think.
So part of the reason why I'm asking this question is, what is that? How is that going to be relevant? And have you witnessed that relevance in terms of what's going on these days? I was asked to do some training today, and it's a lot about just every being in this world wanting to feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of being valued. There's so many different lines of separation. It just seems countless. And the more you hear of all of the real life situations, it seems it just seems endless. And all I could really think about just, when the session was over, that how does something so invisible yet so powerful play a role? Because it seems like it's, I guess you can say, unknown to souls, or it's, as it was mentioned, invisible, incognito. Is it really actually doing anything?
So invisible, so powerful, also to me. So what's happened is that we are seeking things that are not physical. Belonging, personal value, regard, contentment. These are all not physical things, but we've been trying to get them through physicality. And so they're sort of doomed, that approach. So these very invisible that I'm seeking, I'm going to have to use an invisible mechanism to get them. And this is what silence is. I think it's empty because we're looking at it through physical understanding. But through spiritual understanding, I begin to experience that it's so those things I was looking at, again, because it's created through this eternal. It's not created through anything physical. So this system is more powerful, and so am I. So is a soul. So it's a really good match for who I am. To understand the silence, ultimately, is when we start to understand myself as a soul. One of my favorite descriptions of soul is I am a soul, I am silence. So we say Om Shanti, I am a soul, I am silence. Just as the body is made up of matter, understand that. So we give it the things it's made of to keep it sustained are made up of eternal qualities of silence. So that's what we're going to need. And those are carried through silence, not science.
Shanti, thank you. Lots of good clarification in terms of silence and just things I need to pay attention to cultivate that. We'll have a little reflection.
Thinking, seeing, speaking, acting through silence is actually very familiar to each and every one of us. It's our original state. So I'm comforted by this understanding that I'm completely capable of developing a healthy relationship with silence. That attitude, that openness makes it easier for me to begin the journey. A journey that means going inward into an inner meditation room in my inner world. And creating a space that's very simple, where I leave worldly thoughts outside the door of the mind. And I'm okay with focusing on just a single point. Just as a meditator traditionally would be in a cave with a single candle, I come inside, deep into my inner world, and I'm open, trust, focusing on just a single idea. That I am much more than meets the physical eyes. How deeply I had forgotten myself. To wonder, I am the spiritual being inside the life in this body. As I reflect on these ideas, my mind begins to slow down. Ordinary waste thoughts reduce. Everything becomes calm inside. Signs that the journey is beginning. Silence is built from patience. No rushing, just remaining open. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. We just wanted to let souls know that we did send a notice out by email, but in case you are not on email, for different reasons, but we have reduced the number of online offerings for the English meditation. So we still have the interview that's happening on Tuesdays, but then we'll also be having the online evening live meditations as well on Sundays, again 6:30 to 7:30. We do have a large library of recordings, over 1,000, that we are going to try to revise just so that we can have the theme of that recording placed on to the title, so that perhaps maybe these recordings can be useful for souls with different topics that they might be reflecting on in terms of their own spiritual journey. But all of the on-site events are still the same. We wanted to mention that the next Learn About Meditation is, I believe it's the third Saturday of the month. can't remember. I believe it's the 23rd. So that has been posted on the website. There are a few things that we still need to update on there now that we're making some changes, so bear with us. But if you have questions about any of the sessions, please reach out to us by email. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.